Hey, what is up, everybody? This is Stevie Breach coming to you here today as we are in my kitchen and I'm getting ready to leave to go to the gym and go to work. I just finished watching the Legends with JBL with none other than the Outsiders as guests. I'm pouring my milkshake smoothie deal right now, whatever it's called. But really good episode here on the network. It came on after Monday Night Raw last night. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised that they would have Hall and Nash both on at the same time. I thought that they definitely both deserved to have their own episode. As far as I know, I haven't watched all of the Legends with JBLs, but a lot of the other ones have been solo-y. He's had Eric Bischoff, he's had Doc Hendricks, he's had Booker T. He's had a lot of big guests on there, and Hall and Nash as on there. These are guys that really changed the face of professional wrestling back in 1995, 1996, during the sort of dark days of professional wrestling, which led to the big boom. They talk about the fact that, of course, always Kevin Nash is looked at as he is sort of the dark face of professional wrestling. People always like to point out that he was the champion during one of the most down times for wrestling, after sort of the tried experiment of the so-called little guys with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. Definitely the promotion took a big hit when Hulk Hogan left, and anybody could have been in there as champion, and they weren't going to draw just because of the way that the wrestling was in the 80s was, Hulk Hogan was the best, and nothing could touch what Hulk Hogan was. And with him going off to make movies, it's going to go down because people bought pay-per-views to see Hulk because he was the cartoon larger-than-life guy that everybody wanted to be. Of course, NWO has been beaten to death. I think that honestly the best part of the whole episode was when they talked about DDP, and this was sort of near the end of the episode. Basically they talked about the fact of the demons that sort of lurk in Scott Hall's life, and he's embarrassed himself, he's embarrassed his friends, he's embarrassed the company, and people talk about the fact that DDP saved Scott Hall's life, as well as Jake Roberts' life. And they talk about the fact that, DDP had an influence in Scott Hall's life, as well as Kevin Nash's life, coming up through the early days. I think it was Vinny Vegas. He was with him, and then when Scott Hall had a time when he was with DDP as well as his manager, and it's just, everything all came together at the right time and place for, somebody had to get the first hit in on the NWO, and it was DDP, and I love the commentary on that with Eric Bischoff and DDP doing commentary, which sort of was a knockoff on when, Ted DiBiase used to do commentary on Superstars with Vince McMahon. And you see DDP put the NWO shirt on, you think that he's going to be joining the numbers, and all of a sudden, he isn't going to become a statistic of Big Bubba Rogers or a big, Mike Wall Street or those guys that got lost in the back of the NWO. He wants to make a statement, he puts the shirt on, Kevin Nash turns his back, he hits the diamond cutter on Hall, then Nash turns around and he's like, hey, my guy's on the ground, this guy must have taken him out. He goes running across the ring to take out DDP. DDP gets out of the way. Nash takes one of the worst table spots of all time, going over the top rope like a total comedic goof, looking like Sean Stasiak during the Planet Stasiak days. As he comes down, he lands on the table and sort of rolls off, and as he rolls off, he just grabs the table and flings it. So instead of going through it, he actually just it's a comical ordeal. Lots of stories that were shared, basically how Kevin Nash went to WrestleMania 31 thinking he was just going to be going into the Hall of Fame. But as all the old wrestlers from back in the day, you never go to a wrestling show and not bring your gear because you never know what's going to happen. Triple H approaches Kevin Nash at the Hall of Fame practice and says, what did you wear here today? He said a t-shirt and some sweatpants. He goes, after you're done with this, come on over to Levi. And that's where they roll through the whole deal of, DX versus the NWO. Kevin Nash brings up the fact that because he was going into the Hall of Fame, he did bring his gear, but he didn't bring his knee brace. And his knee brace is, basically when Billy Gunn ran through him and did the big, clothesline, Nash hit the ground, and that's when everybody thought that he had blown out his quad once again, and everybody thought that was the funniest thing in the world. And then they were thinking that, maybe he wouldn't be able to come out and do that whole WrestleMania Hall of Fame acceptance where they call his name and he waves, because he was wasn't he the so-called main event that year, even though everybody cared about the Macho Man more than everybody else, but because Macho Man is no longer with us, they didn't make him the main guy, so that the Hall of Fame would end on a sad note. And, basically, we were walking out of the Hall of Fame before Kevin Nash even got there, so it is what it is. But, I mean, lots of fun stories on the show. I definitely would tell you to go out of your way to really check this out. Lots of things that you've seen so far on the NWO DVD, on the Click DVD. Lots of stories are revisited, like how basically WCW signed them to a big deal. Well, first they signed Scott Hall to a deal, and he was able to get Kevin Nash to agree to come because Nash wasn't agreeing with the things that were going on with his paycheck with Vince. So basically he came. Scott Hall told Kevin Nash, make sure when you sign more for this, because he had this sweetheart deal that basically said that he was going to be in the top percentage of guys getting paid by WCW. And by them signing Kevin Nash for more money, it would end up giving Scott Hall more money. And this would be sort of an ordeal where, Nash and Hall would get a lot of guys signed for a lot of money. When Bret Hart came in, they got a raise and so on and so forth. But one of the biggest mistakes that the NWO ever made was that basically there was a lawsuit that was filed because WWE thought that the characters that were being portrayed by Scott Hall and Kevin Nash were being too close to Razor Ramon and Diesel. And they owned the intellectual property of Diesel and Razor Ramon, and they wouldn't be allowed to be shown on WCW Nitro. It was Scott Hall and Kevin Nash that were being shown, but still there was a lawsuit. On the Scott Hall DVD, which I will be reviewing soon because I watched that last week, was the first time that I'd ever seen these so-called court tapes where they were being, basically being put on the stand and telling their side of the story. And you get, in the Scott Hall one, they only showed Scott Hall, but in this one, you get to see Kevin Nash as well. Here he is on the stand, basically doing his testimony of what he thought was going down in this lawsuit. And he's throwing up the too sweet to the camera, telling Vince hello. Scott Hall is trying to sell Vince McMahon an Outsiders t-shirt, talking about how sweet it is, capital SWEET. It's got the NWO right there on the sleeve. But always fun times on these JBL shows. What was the story I was trying to sell? But just basically, by Vince saying that he owned Razor Ramon and Diesel, he was going to try and trick the fans, basically saying that Razor Ramon and Diesel were going to show up on Raw. One of the worst things that Vince has ever done. Not that it was deceiving, because people did believe it, but this is one of the worst things because it didn't work. It was horrible to try and bring back characters. It's almost like trying to think that Sin Cara today is the Sin Cara that debuted after WrestleMania 27. I was thinking about this last night as he was getting his ass kicked by Braun Strowman. Does anybody care about Sin Cara to make this character mean anything for WWE to keep them around? How bad of it, and well, we know Sin Cara didn't work, so let's just put a mask on Hunico and we'll make him wrestle again, but we'll just call him some other luchador's names so that we don't have this everlong story of Sin Cara, a failed wrestler that never went anywhere except having a match against himself at Hell in a Cell, that in the long run didn't mean anything anyways. He's never been in the title picture. He beat Del Rio as a surprise one time on Monday Night Raw, and that's about it. But basically, because WCW freaked out because they said that Diesel and Razor Ramon were going to be coming back, they flew Kevin Nash and Scott Hall to Atlanta on a private jet, sat them down at a table at a Jock and Jill's, which is sort of like a Hooters, I guess you can say Hooters Sports Bar that's in Atlanta, near the CNN Center, and signed them to extensions of their deal, where basically it turned it from a 2-year deal to a 5-year deal with more money, because they thought they were actually going to jump ship, break their contract, and go back and work for Vince again. So in the long run, lots of things during this WCW versus WWE Monday Night War time period did not make any sense. But those things have been beaten into the ground, basically with the whole, what is there? I mean, Monday Night War series, Monday Night War DVD, the NWO DVD, the Scott Hall DVD, the Kevin Nash have his own DVD? I don't think so, not yet at least. Just Life and Death of WCW, even the Starrcade DVD talks about the NWO, lots and lots of things. So for this, go check it out on the network. See you guys down the road.